I'm getting all my equipment here. See, whenever you're getting ready to... I have a question I have to throw out before we get the proceedings underway here. Did Rome fall or did it default? Well, now there's an argument about that because I asked one of our serious thinkers here, and he looked me right in the eye and says, "Well, no, not exactly. The way I understand it, Rome was too busy having orgies, and then all of a sudden the roof fell in." I said, "Well, doesn't that sound just like this damn town?" I mean, someday there's going to be a Gibbon call, and he's going to write Edward Gibbon, not the kind that swings around at a Bronx Zoo, and he's going to write The Rise and Fall and Decline of New York, you know. So, once again, I came face to face with the blank, unyielding face, the visage of the reality of our time. And so that sound of that violin that you hear fluttering high up there on the barricades is Nero himself. As the flames roar and the ashes fly higher and higher and the smoke swirls into the golden Roman sun. Ave Nero, Ave Caesar, Ave, Ave, Ave Pax Romana. And another great human edifice, New York, joins all the past cities of history, declining into the crumbling dust of time. Mesopotamia, Nineveh, Tyre, Rome, and now New York. And the giants that once strode upon this tiny island, the great men who created a dream and a vision, have long since passed into the misty, swirling rainbows of the past. Ave Nueva York. Caesar. Pompeii. Alexandria. Cathay. And now, Bronx, Flatbush, Queens, Manhattan, and Washington Heights. We sing thee with a heavenly chorus into the vast hallowed halls of history, of glories past. This salute was sent to you as part of the public service programming of this station. Copies or transcripts of this salute will be sent upon request by qualified requesters. As Cleopatra's barge headed up the Nile for that fateful meeting. Mark Antony strolling down the dock, girded in his Roman armor, barely perceived the nature of the historic meeting that was about to take place. High overhead, the sacred ibis whirled in the sun. By God, that style. And in faraway Rome, Augustus Caesar lolled upon the throne. Ave Caesar. That was fantastic. That was a rebroadcast from the BBC broadcast of the same name. Ave Caesar. That's what its name was, stupid. Gee, that was exciting, wasn't it, Ed? Every time, I'll tell you, every time you open the window, something exciting blows in. Yeah, I think one day that this place will be just a vast plain peopled with the moldering ruins. Well, of course, this has been the story of all of mankind. You know, it would have been very hard to convince a guy walking down the Appian Way on a bright sunny day, 220 B.C., that one day that all this will be a place where little old ladies with blue hair come with their Instamatics. And that's all that would be left of it. You know. Oh, yeah, you go drive. You ever been to Rome? I'll tell you, that's educational. Yeah, I mean, it's educational in some ways you don't want to be educated in. It really is. You know, you look down at this great, vast Colosseum. Wow. And you're vaguely reminded of Shea. And that's a scary thought. I would not like to think that one day people will come with Instamatics and take pictures of where the bullpen used to be, and they won't know what it even is. They'll just see that little pit down there, you see, and by that time the top will have molded away over it, so it'll just be a little hole in the ground. In fact, if you go around the Colosseum, actually the Colosseum in Rome, I'm not talking about the one up here on Columbus Circle here, which is a nothing Colosseum compared to the real Biffy. I'll tell you, you walk around the real Colosseum there, and there's thousands of cats run around in there. You've probably heard of the cats of Rome. Well, they're mean-looking cats, and they're all around there, and there's all kinds of native theories about it and superstitions. There's one superstition that the cats of Rome, or at least the ones that live in the Colosseum in that area, are sacred. They contain the ghosts of the great line of the Caesars. This is a theory. You didn't hear that, right? You come to the right place. You just don't hear this kind of stuff from Phyllis Diller, buddy. And I'll tell you, and it's delivered with such style. You notice that. But nevertheless, these cats scurry up and down these fallen pillars. And you can buy postcards, see, which are archaeological, theoretical reconstructions of how the Colosseum must have looked, or theoretically should have looked in its great heyday. And that's scary. By God, that looks like Yankee Stadium. I mean, you know, that big crowd there? And they had their sports. You know, they didn't only sacrifice Christians there. That whole thing was not built for that event. You know that, don't you? Or don't you? A lot of people think Colosseum Christians, you know, lions and all that bit. But they had other things that went on there. For example, they were famous for the discus at the time. And there was a rule, a standing rule, just like at Shea. Any discus that goes up in the stands could be scrambled for. And whoever got it owned it. Well, you know how a foul ball is here at Shea. Somebody foul tips one back a third. All the yahoos running around spilling beer and yelling and grabbing for the ball. Well, this is a tradition, and it's continued to this very day. They did it in the Colosseum, and also too they had when you came into the Colosseum, In the ancient days of Rome, you bought a ticket, you know. You just didn't walk in there. Oh, this was a commercial enterprise. Or didn't you ever think of it that way? In fact, they have preserved right there in the, as you come into it, there's several entrances, just like, you know, Shea. They have E, D, C, Section 7 and all that. And you come into the entranceway, and there you can see the little pit there that still remains where there used to be a counter. And this mad-looking guy used to hold up a sign, all sold out. You know, and there were scalpers. There would be scalpers hanging around the front, even in those days. I mean, if a big event was in town, if they were playing Carthage or something that day, and, you know, the league was really tight, the people crowded. Yes, they did play Carthage. You're not kidding? And they also played Sparta, and teams would come, and they'd fight it out. Now, what did they do? Well, one of the things they did, they hurled, among other things, the javelin. You've seen the javelin. And they hurled the javelin, and that was a big, very popular event. And there was also a rule that if a javelin ever went up into the stands, whoever got it in the thorax could not sue because right there it says on his ticket that he absolves the management and the owners of the Coliseum of all responsibility due to the fact this is an athletic contest, and that's one of the conditions of purchasing the ticket. And that's just exactly what happens out at Shea. If you get drilled in the left ear by a wild pitch from Tom Seaver, you cannot go down there and, you know, no way. It says right on your ticket. Did you ever look at your ticket? They also had rain checks. Began even in those days because, you know, the torrential spring rains would wash out many a very exciting event. And if you've paid 7 denarii or drobniks or skudniks or whatever it is they were using, and what was the money of Rome? Lira? Lira? Centime? What was it? You don't know. Well, they had money. In fact, to this day, people make earrings out of Roman coins. What was the Roman coin called? Class. Well, you don't know. Well, it doesn't matter. It was dough. And, yes, what you call money makes no difference. Whether it's pounds, skubniks, drobniks, wampum, it's all the same thing. It's what you ain't got and those guys at the top of the hill got. And and in any society, there's guys at the top of the hill. And if you don't think so, I would suggest you visit Leningrad. You'll see a lot of guys living in little houses about the size of shoe boxes, you know, with bad ventilation and no toilets. And up at the top of the hill lies the local commissar's estate. and so, you know, it's always this way. It's man. It's not the system, it's man. So, nevertheless, the thing that we want to get back down to is, of course, the story of the Roman Colosseum. It's very exciting. You walk around the Colosseum, and you look at it, and you just can't help but imagine what must have gone on here. Because large parts of it are unknown. Because the sport pages of the times were written in very perishable type paper and was used largely for birdcage bottoms and stuff, and nobody really thought to preserve that. You know, early historians didn't think the sports were important of a society. This is early historians like the guys that came, you know, 800 B.C., something like that, or AD rather. So they threw out all the sport pages and skipped the editorial pages. That's why we still have Plato. But nobody describes what happened that big afternoon when Carthage came in and cleaned out Rome in a fantastic upset. And the natives rioted in the stands, which they did. And they actually did. Just like, go out to Randall's Island. And they burned the stands. You know, those exciting, those hot blood of the Latin temperament. And so these were a lot of hot-blooded Latins sitting up there watching that crowd throw the spears from Sparta. Now, Sparta, of course, was a big enemy at the time. Now, Sparta was a legendary crowd to the Romans, believe it or not. The reason they were legendary is because the Spartans, the people from Sparta, the Spartans, lived a life which is totally the opposite of the life lived by the Romans. They lived a life which later became known as a Spartan existence. That's how we got the phrase Spartan. Yes, Spartan. Yes, that's quite true. I'm telling you history. I ain't inventing it. I don't invent the past, buddy. I'm only giving it to you. So the Spartans lived a Spartan existence. Whereas the Romans lived, guess what? A Roman existence. We all know what the Roman existence was. Eat, drink, and be merry. And they hung around the swimming pool a lot, and the Nubian handmaidens came around and stuffed them with grapes and hummingbird tongues and stuff like that, and they perfumed the water, and it was just one hell of a party after another. And of course the Spartans, on the other hand, they would hang around doing nothing but push-ups, and they lived a very, very frugal existence. In fact, the word frugal comes from a sect of the Spartans called the Frugasos, which were Phrygians, later known as a frugal existence, which went even beyond the Spartan existence. Well, all right. So when the two philosophies came to push and to shove, when the Spartans arrived, this was a very historic day, which, by the way, was reported by many Roman historians. When the Spartans arrived with their athletic team, their team of javelins, throwers, their team of relay runners, which was a very big sport in those days. And there was a lot of motivations to win the relay race in those days. The losers, by the way, were fed to the lions. So you ran like the wind. I'll tell you. Oh, yes, you really went. Well, of course, the losers today are fed to the lions. We call them sports writers today. And many a guy has been fired right out of his job as a result of what Red Smith said. In a fit after the pennant was lost again. So the Spartans arrived, and according to local Roman legend, the Spartans arrived, and they were kept in their hotel room, which was very antithetical to the way the Roman athletes behaved. They didn't have a hotel room. In fact, they hung around a local house of ill fame. And yes, this is how that expression got the currency. We will discuss that later. That comes next semester. Any of you are going to be here next semester, you'll learn the origin of that phrase, house of ill fame. What does the word fame mean? What does the word? How did it get currency? Well, Flaminius was a town in northern Italy. You're learning, aren't you, today? It was just north of Etrusca, where the Etruscans lived. Now they lived pretty far north, already for starters. But we could go into this. This gets pretty silly after a while. It really doesn't have much relevance to what the hell's happening in Staten Island. But we just thought you might want to know some of these things today, because after all, we are now right on the very brink of what happened to Rome immediately following the defeat by the Spartans. You see, up to the point where the Spartans arrived, everybody in Rome kind of felt things, well, what the hell, they're not so good, but it's going pretty good. After all, I was at a good party last night. Everything's going to be cool. And the togas were drifting happily in the breeze. Everyone was enjoying the grapes, the Nubian handmaidens, although some of the Nubian handmaidens at that time already were showing signs of discontent. They hadn't actually stuffed the grapes down into the bazoo of a local Roman and, did it with plum. And says, you know what you can do with your grapes the next time, Augustus or Octavius or whoever it is they were talking to. So I had names like that in those days. Funny. But nevertheless, to continue on the lecture here, when the Spartans arrived, they arrived on a Saturday. Now, that was very significant because the word Saturday was already in the language, not quite in the same form we know of it, but it was named after the god Saturn. You knew this, of course, that Saturday is from the Roman Saturnus. You knew this? Of course. All right. So they arrived on Saturday. By the way, Saturday is also allied closely in local legend with the phrase Satanius or Satan. Aha! That puts a different color on the thing. That's why people go out and tie one on Saturday. Saturday is the devil's day in many secular religions. And so when, you're really learning a lot tonight. So when the Spartans arrived, they arrived on Saturday. And there were already local harbingers of ill will, if you will, negative thinkers, who pointed out that this was an omen, that quite possibly the Spartans have allied themselves with Satan, or Satanus or Saturnium. There was a god up on the hill there. Nobody went near it because, boy, the house of Saturnius was a very, very nervous house to go near. This was where reposed Satan, or the god of evil things. Most people hung around the house of Diana, which was the house of plenty, you know, Diana the Hunt and all that sort of thing. They also liked to hang around Jupiter, which was the house of large amounts of money. They hung around that one too, Juvius Pluvius. They also, there was money around there. So, but hardly anyone hung around that one up on the hill, that little angry-looking house, the house of Saturnius. Well, there was rumors that the Spartan athletes had allied themselves, and incidentally, they also dressed differently and wore large flowing mustaches, as opposed to the Grecian and the Roman style, particularly the Roman style of the clean-shaven face. And there was a rumor that one Spartan athlete had been trained by putting a ravening, hungry fox inside of his tunic and letting him chew at his entrails for about 4 hours. Yes, you know this phrase. So you don't know the legend of the Spartan youth? Well, God, ignorance is... You understand that the term ignorance itself derives from a Roman sub-god, ignoramus, or ignorimius. Often later on in the Byzantine period it became, finally the word declined and decayed until finally it became ignorant Slav. Well, so you are all in the grasp, all of you are in the grasp of the god Ignorinius, or ignominius, that's it, with an M, ignominius, which means that you're ignorant louts. So nevertheless, as the Spartans came striding out of their hotel room, flat-bellied, lean, hard, slit-eyed, bronzed, with their bodies oiled and supple in the sun. They went into the Colosseum. They went down to the players' entrance, by the way. As they went down to the Colosseum, a roar of applause roared out through one secular crowd that was for the Spartans, but of course the vast number of people, 80,000 or more, were Roman fans, because after all it was a hometown crowd. The games began, and shortly after the beginning of the games, it became quite evident that it was going to be more than a simple defeat. It was going to be what we call today a wipeout. The Spartans literally wiped out the Romans on that historic Sunday many centuries ago. Discontent settled in immediately following the last event, which, in case you're interested, was a team tag relay event. And the Spartans finished the team tag relay event a full lap and a half ahead of the best of all the Roman champions, and it was just wipeoutsville. So there was a great amount of discontent. And at that point, the citizens of Rome began to criticize the government of Rome. They began to, guys that stand around in a corner and make rotten remarks about the current Caesar. And they began to gripe about the taxes. They began to gripe about the quality of the grapes. And of course, as a natural result of this, the grape sellers then, out of pique and irritation, raised the price of the grapes. And one thing led to the other, and ultimately, all that was left of Rome was a pile of stone. Now frequented only by drifting herds of cats and old ladies snapping under the bright Roman sunlight endless rolls of Instamatic film, usually size 628, as opposed to the more closer-grained 120. It in itself a slap in the face. And so just suggest, friends, that things may come to, as we call, a pretty pass. And by the way, that also is a Roman phrase. And so, as you walk through the Colosseum, you tend to have these images. Did you know that once when I was in the Middle East, it's a great sight, one of those great sights which I've always retained in my mind is there's certain high points in traveling, as being a world traveler rather than just once I went to Paris. When you spend a lot of time traveling in very, very off-the-wall places of the world, you wind up with a few really dynamic images in your head. And one of the great images that I had in my head, that I've got right smack in the middle of my head, well, it was in the Dead Sea region. Now, this is a place that your average walking around tourist doesn't often visit. First of all, It's very easy to understand how the people who came out of the Dead Sea region created tremendous religions. Because this is one of the wildest, scariest regions, if not the wildest, scariest region in the world. I mean, just physically. It's incredible. Oh, I'll tell you, it's fantastic. So I came down in a Jeep, and I'm with this other guy, and obviously, and this guy is a Romanian, and jovial Romanian, and we're both driving in a Jeep. Actually, it was a Rover, Land Rover. And we started to drive around the Dead Sea. Now, the Dead Sea is not very large, really. It's probably 2 or 3 miles one way and about a mile the other way. And it's surrounded by these vast crags all around you. And the shore is absolutely snow white, but the shore is not sand. It is thick, really thick, like feet thick, crusted salt. And it goes all the way back up, and it looks blinding in the sun. It's very hot, and so we drove. This isn't far where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so we drove along the shore, and you could smell that tremendous acrid smell of bitter salt or bitter something. It's just bitter in the air. And we'd had a sandwich or two, and it's kind of depressing because the air doesn't move. It's down at the bottom of this great vast geographical or geological sinkhole, and it just sort of sits there. And we're riding along, and all of a sudden, on this little road is a sign. It says, "You are now entering Sodom." Sodom and Gomorrah. How many of you would like to have visited Gomorrah or Sodom? There it is. It's still there. And there's a little pumping station there where they're pumping stuff out of the Dead Sea. You see where they get the phrase soda? Salt, soda, sodium? It's from Sodom. Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? And so here it is, sitting there, nothing there. And up on the cliff, far off to the right, which is a salt cliff rising to the sky, stark, there is the legend, this is where Lot's wife turned and looked back at Gomorrah and was instantly turned to stone. Salt, a pillar of salt. And there is a pillar of salt standing there. And this pillar stands up against the sun. And this is a legend, of course, that this is what is all that's left of Lot's wife. You drive out of the city limits of Sodom, which, by the way, are maybe 30 feet from the other city limits of Sodom. It's a place about 200 feet around now. And you drive through Gomorrah. And you head up through the pass, going back down towards the mines of Solomon. You've heard of Solomon, of course. Well, he has mines, you know. That's how he got so rich. How do you think he lived to be 900 years old? You don't think a guy that's poor lives to be 900, do you? Oh, stupido. God, this show was rich in imagery tonight, wasn't it? Historical connotation, significant omens, portents. There's the fox gnaws at your entrails. The Spartans are on their way, buddy. And they all got 350 batting averages. It's not going to do you any good to hope that Bud Harrelson will save us. Not this season. Chris Chambliss? Are you kidding?